said it is impossible for African arts to go into extinction. I would like if you can elaborate on that and why you believe that African arts cannot go into extinction.
Art is simply an expression of an idea a person has, and as an individual, he expresses that idea using available materials in his cultural, and social environment. This is what he does, and that is why we call him an artist. An artist is somebody, who has the capacity, to explore materials in a way that when he produces the work of art, it, shows a kind of, creativity, a kind of beauty that people who are observing the works of art will say, wow, what a work of art. And that is why, African art, is a production of Africans by Africans using the African, materials or materials that are available in the cultural environment called Africa. And that is why it is difficult for African art to go into extinction. Another reason why it is difficult is that art, has to do with identity, or what I call identity construction. When you see a work of art, how do you know that this work is an Indian art, it's an African art, or it's a European art? Because it has the elements of culture, the patterns, the motifs, the symbolism, and even the issues and the themes that are explored by artists, in Africa, then and now. They reflect the background, of Africa, the people, the culture, the philosophy. And that is why I believe that it is, being unnecessary superfluous to say that African art will go into extinction. This idea or this kind of, view is being advanced, by people I can describe as Eurocentric people. People who believe that, Europe or the West, must be the standard, for anything that, is being done in the world, including art. So if you think that, this is Picasso's work, this is Rembrandt's work, you should be able to say, this is from Africa, this is from Nigeria, this is from Yoruba, because it bears the identity of the maker. Another reason why African art cannot really go into extinction is because, there's something about culture. Culture is dynamic. And, the good thing about culture, is that the practitioner of that culture, the custodian of that culture, whether as an artist or as a dancer, as a musician, is that they must be able to adapt to the changing realities, of the times, of the contemporary times, wherever they find themselves. Whether it's technology, whether it is new ideas, influx of foreign culture, they must adapt. But while adapting to all these, foreign things, new cultures, new ideas, they must not forget what distinguishes them, from other, cultures of the world. And for African artists, to be so distinguished and to carry the art beyond, the future, let me put that way, beyond the future, to be relevant to whatever is happening around us, is for them to continue to integrate, African patterns, African motifs, African ideas, issues and philosophies, symbolism. Because these are the things that actually make up, works of art. And what, is it that the art historian focus on? The art historian, focuses on, analyzing, investigating, and then, rethinking or recritiquing, this symbolism, these ideas, these issues as being projected in works of art. And that's what we do as art historians. So, another point why African art cannot go into extinction is because, the African artist, is a product of his cultural environment. And so he has no choice. So I would like to, make reference to a quotable quote, by John Drewer. John Drewer happens to be a foremost, Africanist professor of African art. These are the people that, started promoting African art, and they try to, help it to have a kind of a new nomenclature from just being, objects, of worship, objects of rituals, to becoming, what you can study as a discipline, and he said that no matter how creative an individual artist is, he cannot create in a cultural void, meaning he has no choice but to reflect his culture, either consciously or otherwise.
Can we go down memory lane and tell us where art began from?
Art begins in caves, in temples, in shrines. What do I mean by this? Art began with the first man, the prehistoric man. When we talk about the prehistoric man, for us in our profession, we refer to that person as the prehistoric artist. So now what we are looking at the creative activities of the first man, the early men, wherever they are. So art is natural for him because he discovered it accidentally and naturally. Art is something that comes to you, naturally. You just have this kind of feeling, that kind of impression. And it has to do with your capacity to manipulate available materials. It could be clay, it could be paint, it could be tangible and even intangible materials. It could be ephemera, it could be materials that can last forever, like gold, like iron, and the likes. So, talking about the origin of art, is a question that cannot really be answered, in totality, because art developed, in different cultures across the world, independently. It is not the West or the Europeans or the Americans that brought art to Africa. It is not the Indians that brought art, to Africa, or the Africans, maybe took art to, the Himalayas mountain. No. As an individual, as a human being, you have this kind of ingrained mechanism. That's, sensitivity, within you to want to respond, to nature. And because, as an individual artist, you look around, you see nature, the mountains, the hills. All these things serve as inspiration for the artist. And it's like if God, in his creative power and essence, can produce this thing, I can do the same thing. The Bible says, God made man in his own image. And one of the distinctiveness of God is creativity. So man also has that, creative ability, capacity to produce, to make things out of things, material, that are available or that are not available, and then he makes use of his imagination. He makes use of his memory. And all these things, put together will help us to understand the origin of art. Like I said, it is a human phenomenon. In other words, it is natural. It's something that you do, And you said something about maybe in 1900, no. And that is why we call it from prehistoric, before the recording of history. Before history began, either as a discipline or before man begins to learn how to write. In fact, it was Albert Reid that says that man learns to draw, and drawing is a part of art before he learns to write. So art comes naturally. Every child is an artist. It's about the problem is to keep him an artist as he grows up. So what I mean by this is that for me as an individual, I'm just like any other, child growing up in any environment of the world, be it, in US, in UK, in China, be it in Nigeria, I'm just like any other person. When I was in secondary school, let me just say that, my art teacher, he lost me. He said, you are good, you are this and that. I love your drawing, but it's very small, It's very small because when I was very young, I used to be very small stature. He said, you are small just like your drawing is as miniature just like you. But thank God for his, encouragement. And I began to show interest, like now. I believe that one thing about art is developing the capacity to be able to record the way you see it. Observation is very key. So if the flower is red, so let me capture it as red. If the figure is standing akimbo, so let me capture it as, akimbo. So all these things begin to push me forward and encourage me, to choose. So eventually, when I went to apply for, to get admission to the university, I settled for fine art. Eventually, I picked literature and then theater arts, but because I could not combine it then, the University of Ibadan, said I couldn't combine it, for that particular session. So eventually I have to settle for fine art. And that's how I find myself, in Ile-Ife. I was first of all given admission to study fine art at the Polytechnic Ibadan, but I chose, Ife because this is a university. And I believe that, whatever they will teach me about art, in the university system, will be much more, intriguing. I don't even know what's the difference then. But I just felt that I should also go to the university. So that's how I developed that interest. And the passion remained the same.
Every artist is believed to have a particular medium they use to create. So we would like to know what is your medium and if you use multiple mediums to create.
Yes, thank you. For me, as an artist, I use clay. Clay, that's my medium. And then when I use the clay to produce works of art, it becomes what they call pottery, ceramics, or terracotta, sculpture. You can see some of my works there, I explore the, elastic nature, the plastic nature of clay to produce different kinds of works, And then my themes vary from philosophy, motherhood, aesthetics, and the likes. So the reason why I explore clay is because I specialize in ceramics. In pottery, you are required to specialize in an aspect of the department, either painting, sculpture, graphics, photography, and the likes. So I chose ceramics because of the nature of clay itself. Because when I was in part 1 and part 2, I used to marvel at the way, our senior dan, where they used to explore materials during throwing, using the clay to produce all forms of works. And I begin to wonder that this is not clay. This is not it's not wood, it's not cement, it's not stone. So it was that curiosity that made me to specialize in it. And having specialized in it so far, I have no regret because there's something about clay. That's my personal philosophy. It takes me closer to nature, Mother Earth. What I do explore other, material. So depending on, maybe for pastime or for some other reasons.
What are some of the challenges you face as both an artist and an educator? You're an art educator, you're a lecturer. Are there some challenges? How has it been balancing teaching art and practicing art?
Well, the major challenge that I face in my profession as an artist and as an art historian or a teacher of art is the constant struggle to balance practice with research. And it's not really easy. At times, because you have to teach, you have to study, you have to teach the students, you have to grade the scripts. At times for you to survive in the academia, you have to research and document your findings and publish them so that you can have promotion. So it has not really been easy for me to actually strike a meaningful balance. Some people have the grace to do that, but for me, I do more of theory, more of teaching than, producing works of art. The works I've produced so far now, I should have gone to, exhibition hall to display what I've produced so far. But due to, the demand of my academics, as an art historian, as a teacher, I could not really do much,
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. I would also like to ask you, are there lecturers that don't practice art, but they lecture art, they teach art? Like they do not practice at all, and they lecture and they teach art. And what impact as you're practicing? What impact as you're practicing? How have you? Let me put it clean. I'm going to cut all this time, yeah. Okay. What impact does your teaching have? What impact does your practicing have on your teaching?
I define art as the theory of practice and the practice of theory. Because in the academia, we teach our students to learn the theoretical, issues around art. Because when they have this understanding of the theories, history of art, it will help them to be able to create works of art, that are meaningful, that make sense, that can be a kind of agents of transformation or change in society. And that is why we have to take them through, the stories of artists before them who have explored diverse materials in diverse environments for diverse purposes. So there's always a contest between practice and theory, okay? And that's the reason why in the US, I don't know much about, Nigeria or in Africa. In the US, there are some people that specialize in art history. They study art, they teach art, they study artists, works of art, the reasons for the production of works, and the factors that, help them to produce. And they never go into the studio to practice art. So I want to take recourse to what one of our scholars said, Feldman. He said no matter how creative or how good an artist is, he cannot be the sole interpreter of the work he has produced. And the same thing goes for the art historians. There are some of them that even in our faculty here, there are some people in the Department of English, they specialize in semantics. Semantics simply means the study of signs, and symbols. So if they discuss art and interpret works of art, you'll be wondering, wow, are these art historians? No. But no matter how good they are as critics, as interpreters of works of art, what the artists have produced, they cannot really do better than someone who combines both the practice and the theory. And that is why for you to be a good artist, you need the knowledge of the theory. And for you to be a good, art historian, you need knowledge of the studio. Practice is very, very important because it helps you to, identify with the challenges the artists face. Some people in the academia who don't practice all the time, they feel that the artists, outside the academia, they're just making money. They're just producing. It's not that easy because the issue of producing the works, going for the exhibition, entrepreneurship in how to market their works is very, very, tedious. But for the academia, you will collect the salary at the end of the day. So you may not really know much. But if you combine both ends, together, you'll be able to appreciate the artist outside there. And the artists outside there, when they see what we sometimes write about their works, they also, appreciate us.
Thank you so much, sir. One last question is going to be for students aspiring to pursue a career in arts, particularly in sculpting and ceramics. What advice would you give them based on your own experience?
Well, nowadays you find that a student, don't want to specialize in ceramics because by nature of the course, it is strenuous, it is time consuming. And it requires someone with resilience and determination to specialize in ceramics. And by extension, even sculpture too. You need someone who is very energetic, very, vivacious, to specialize in sculpture. But these areas are very wonderful areas to specialize. So I will encourage, any student want to specialize in either of these, areas to just make up his mind, to contribute and to weather the storm, the challenges. Challenges will always come. Even in painting, we have challenges. Today, AI, technology and the likes, they have taken over. But you see, the individuality of the artist, exploring AI and technology will also always reflect in whatever they do.